Self-publishing or traditional publishing, what should you do? Most of the people who are giving advice on this either have only traditionally published or have only self-published. And so I'm coming at this, just so you know, as somebody who self-published and sold about 250,000 copies of self-published books, and now have since signed, six-figure plus traditionally published book deals. And so I've done both. And I figured out also how to monetize books in a lot of different ways, to the point where, in a couple affiliate links in some of my books have made me over $1 million. I've put on conferences off of the books. I've done speaking, 5-figure speaking things off of the books. In addition, though, I've sold books every which way. I've self-printed my own books. I've used Kindle KDP to use Amazon to print my own books. I have bundled my books together. I've done free plus shipping offers. I tell you all of this because I've kind of done it all with book publishing on reasonably big scales. And so I have a lot of opinions about traditional versus self-publishing. The first opinion that I have is a lot of the people who are saying that you should self-publish, that are really loud about it, they're saying that for a combination of a few reasons. I think that they're saying that because A, they can't get a big traditionally published a book, or they're very young and they have not experienced a lot, or they're very short-term thinkers. They're so caught in the financial aspect of it that they miss a lot of the hidden economies of book publishing and what it can create and how you actually use books to further your career. And so I'll talk about the economics of self-publishing versus traditionally publishing first. And then I'll talk about, a lot of the reasons why I decided to go traditionally publishing after a long time and making a lot of money in self-publishing. And then I'll talk about why you should probably start self-publishing anyway. So let's get into it. First of all, the economics of it. If you self-publish a book, you get 60% of the revenue of the book. If you traditionally publish a book, you generally get about 15% royalty, but if you have an agent, the agent gets 15% of your 15%, so you actually get about 12.5% of the book. Now, 15% is the highest royalty rate. Often authors go on an escalating scale where their publishing deal will start 7,500, 10, 12.5, 15, not thousand percent royalty rate. But optimally, you're basically never going to go above a 15% royalty rate, which means you're never going to, if you have an agent, go above a 12.5% royalty rate. So now you're talking about 12% versus 60% royalty on a book sale, right? Like that is a huge, huge, huge gap. Okay, let's break down these numbers though a little bit better, because you don't get 60% of your self-published book. What you actually get is 60% of the list price minus the cost to print the book. And so if a list price of a book, let's say, is $22, and Amazon is going to charge you $5 to print that book, you actually get 60% of 22 minus 5. You get 60% of, what is that, $17? So now you're not looking at a 60% royalty off of list. You're actually more like a 47, 48% royalty. So now you're looking at the difference between 12.5 and call it 48% royalty. So, the gap's starting to get a little bit closer, but still pretty far off. Okay, if you self-publish a book, most self-published books are not published well. If you self-publish a book well, and you hire the right people and good people to professionally edit and design and produce your book, you're going to spend a minimum of $20,000, usually $30 to $50, even upwards of $50 to $100,000 to do it. If you spend less than that, the odds are that even if your information is good in your book is produced so poorly that it's really just kind of a shoddy product. So now you're talking about upfront paying, call it $25,000 on the lowest scale. You're upfront paying $25,000 that's coming out of your pocket before you earn a cent, well in advance of this book coming out, if you're self-publishing. Whereas if you're traditionally publishing, you sign a book deal. You might get, call it $100,000 broken up into 3 payments. Most book, they're all structured a little bit differently, but for example, mine is like the first third comes when the contract's accepted, the second third comes when the manuscript is accepted, the final installment of the advance comes on the day of the book release. And so, using that example of $100,000, you're now talking about, you sign the book deal before you even start really writing the book. You're getting your first advance payment of $33,300, right? So now you're talking about not $25,000 versus $33,000, you're actually talking about a $58,000 swing, if you think about it, right? Because instead of putting out $25,000, I'm taking in $33,000. Before your book even comes out, you're going to get 2/3 of that royalty, which means you're going to get $60,000 plus coming in. Before your book comes out, if you're self-published, you're going to be out tens of thousands of dollars. So you see how this gap now starts to shrink even a little bit more as you start to go through this. Also consider the fact that a book is a product. A book is a business. Everybody involved in book publishing are people that you need to manage if you're self-publishing. You could go with one of these hybrid, book in a box type publishers, and some of them are very, very good and they'll give you good people, but you still need to be involved in the process every single day. And so instead of thinking about my book or my next book or anything like that, you actually have to kind of become a project manager, which means you have to take on a new job. And that takes away from your ability potentially to write a great book. It also takes away from potentially your ability to write another book. And so think about my examples with The Obvious Choice and the next book that's coming out after it. I'm sitting here recording this. The Obvious Choice book has not come out yet when I'm recording this. I've already signed the book deal for the next book and have one chapter left to write in the first draft, which means I've received already the first 2/3 of the book deal for The Obvious Choice. I'm about to get the final installment of that when the book comes out. I've also signed the deal and received the first payment from the next book. So now, by the time that the Obvious Choice book comes out, I'm not going to tell you my real numbers for advances, they're bigger than this, but by the time that The Obvious Choice comes out, let's say I get a $100,000 advance on both books, I'm actually going to have received $130,000. I'll have received 4 royalty payments. Advances, but 4 royalty payments before my first book even comes out, as opposed to putting out the $25,000. So now you're talking about, call it $150,000, $160,000 swing based off of those numbers. This gap starts to shrink real freaking fast, doesn't it? My ability to produce work year after year after year after year, there is no way if I self-published The Obvious Choice, would I have been able to almost have finished writing the next book by the time that The Obvious Choice has come out. Where this really came to me though is I started to speak to other people in publishing, in media, and I called up a friend of mine, Jason Pfeiffer. He's the editor-in-chief for Entrepreneur Magazine, and I called him and I asked him, I was like, hey, I'm doing another book. What do you think? Traditional self-publishing? I asked him this question, kind of open-ended. And what he said to me, I'll never forget. He said, John, I know you can write a great book. I know you can sell books. Fine. So from my point of view in the legacy media, what I can tell you is that I don't even look at self-published books. He says, that's not me saying that all self-published books are bad, but I understand that the vast majority of self-published books are bad. And I get so many books across my desk that if a book comes from a big publisher, I will usually look at it. If a book comes that's self-published, I just simply don't have the time. And I understand that I'm occasionally going to miss something that's very good, but that's a trade-off that I have to keep into mind. And I thought about that a lot, and it makes sense. It's like, it's not that it's impossible if you self-publish to really break through, in a traditional way. You just have a lot more of the ladder to climb. You're just starting really kind of behind, and you have to scratch and claw a lot more. So I thought about that a lot. And then I started to look around, not at what people were telling me on social media about what to do. I started to look around for real world examples of people executing at a high level for an extended period of time that I admired. And I looked at what they did. I'm not as interested in what people say they do. I'm more interested in what people actually do. It's this idea of like, I don't know the exact stat, over 80% of mutual fund advisors don't actually invest in their own mutual funds, and it's so, what do authors that I admire do? And look around you. I mean, authors who are pursuing authorship in a big way and have had a lot of success, that also have big platforms, that are also business-minded. One that comes to mind is Ryan Holiday, somebody that I admire a lot. And he is one of the best book marketers in the world. He has a gigantic platform. You could not find, he clearly knows how to write books and get books edited. You could not find somebody who would be better positioned to self-publish books. And yet, what do you notice? He still traditionally publishes all of his books. It's like, okay. So that's a really interesting data point, isn't it? And look around you at anybody who takes this authorship thing seriously and the business of authorship seriously. And one thing that you'll notice is almost across the board, in every single case, they traditionally publish. Okay, so that's a really interesting data point. And so I started thinking about these things, and then I started looking at all of the false economies. Yes, 100% I will make more per copy sold self-published than I will traditionally published, but I'm going to have that money going out on the front end instead of coming in on the front end, which means I'm not going to be able to invest in my platform, which means I'm not going to have the freedom and flexibility to build my team to promote the books. In addition, the incentive structure when you work with a traditional publisher is all of you are trying to sell books. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't have minor disagreements on the best path, but all of you are trying to sell books, and all of you are going to win when the books sell well. Self-published, if you own all the rights, you pay people to help you self-publish the book, and then they're gone. Right? That incentive structure is not aligned that same way. Okay, so it doesn't mean that you can't find good people, but it's harder to find people who is out deeply embedded in your system. And then, of course, you just have bigger teams. You just have better teams of skilled people who are going to project manage this thing. I mean, the Obvious Choice book was finished and written over a year before it came out. The bug is also a feature. It forces you to slow down and force me to put a lot more time into marketing. But also, that whole time when HarperCollins and their entire team and legal and copy editing and design and everything was going through everything that they were doing, I was producing the proposal and pitching the next book and writing the next book. And then every once in a while I'd get, here's some illustrations. Let's talk back and forth about these things. I never have to think about this book that's going out. Okay, well, there's a false economy. I'm able to pitch and produce my next book. I would not have been able to do that if I was project managing this entire project all the way through. So now you can start stacking on these projects, one on top of another, of another, of another, of another. Okay, so why do I still think that just about everybody should self-publish first? Well, a guy that I like, Nat Eliason, he wrote a book called Crypto Confidential, very, very, extremely well-produced book, well-written book, and he's super smart. One of the things that he said that I also agree with is, if you can't get a minimum six-figure book deal, you probably shouldn't try to traditionally publish. The reasons for that are many. Number one, if you can't work with one of the sort of big publishers, are you going to get the type of resources that you want? If they're not betting on you and making you one of their main bets that year, does that mean that you are going to get their top resources? You want their top editorial talent. You want their marketing team to go to bat for you. And you've got to deliver a great product too, but them giving you a lot of money is basically them making an investment into you. They're going to do more to protect that investment. And so if they're only going to give you a $10,000 or $15,000 advance, for example, they're probably not going to put that much into the book being a success because they don't have that much invested into it. And so in that case, you might be better off self-publishing first. Another reason to self-publish first, though, is, and this is the part that I actually really love, and I'm excited to see how this is going to play out in my career, is traditional publishing, you have the name recognition, right? You can lead with it, and there's a chance that the book will become really, really big, and when it happens, you want to have all your other kind of ducks in a row when that happens. Well, having a back catalog of books or products or something that you own that are high profit, like a self-published catalog of books, prepared for when your traditionally published book hits, that sounds to me like that's rocket fuel, right? Like, I've got 5 self-published books on Amazon. Okay, well, I'm now traditionally publishing a book. Well, this traditional published book and the next one and the next one and the next one, one of them is going to hit. I don't know when, I don't know how, but I'm working so damn hard at this for so long, trying to execute at such a high level, putting so much into it, that one of them is going to hit, right? At one point. I don't know if it's going to sell millions of copies, but my goal is to hit a lot of singles and doubles and occasionally leg out a triple with this thing. I'm just going to keep showing up until that happens. And so when that happens, I have a back catalog of self-published books where I make that 60% royalty that are all going to go along for a ride, that are all going to get recognized and almost this new energy to them. And so if you're looking at this career of authorship, of thought leadership with a long lens, I think it probably makes sense to self-publish first, particularly self-publish to a niche or even a niche of a niche, because that's how you're going to break through. I mean, that's what we talk about in The Obvious Choice, about how if you want to build a monopoly, you actually need to monopolize the smallest available market first. You don't want a lot of competition when you're new. And so, you go tighter, you go more niched, and you can do that self-publishing in a way that you can't traditionally publish. And so over time, you might want to expand out to more adjacent markets, right? And so you do that with self-published books. You do them highly profitable. And then you build up your audience, you build up your back catalog of sales. That back catalog of sales will help you get a book deal that's going to be that six-figure book deal, but you also have this back catalog now that when your book comes out, yeah, sure, you'll get the advance. Hopefully you'll earn back that advance and make the royalties, but even if you don't, you have the back catalog that's going to go for the ride and make you way more money in the future. And I think that is the path that most authors or aspiring authors should kind of move towards in order not to necessarily maximize their revenue today, but maximize their returns on all of their investments in time and effort over the course of their careers, which hopefully is a long career.